everyone. Good morning and happy Friday. Mavens is back and I'm super excited. I almost forgot how to do all of my little control things on here on Streamer, but I'm super excited that I figured it out. For those of you tuning in, this is the first episode of 2026 and I'm really excited to invite Brittany Greer as my featured guest today. Hello, Brittany. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, I think Jim Mayer is the one that introduced us. He sent me your name and he's like, you have to get in touch with this lady. She is the founder of Rosie Riveters. So right away I was like, oh, she is inspired by Rosie the Riveter and I'm on board with that. So thank you for taking time out of your day to speak with me here. So can you just start off with an introduction of yourself? Like, who are you? How did you come to find Rosie Riveters and what are some of the things that you're doing in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I obviously love your logo and the name. But I'm Brittany Greer. I'm the executive director and founder of Rosie Riveters. We are a 501c3 nonprofit that works with kids from kindergarten through 12th grade. We are specifically focused on engaging and inspiring kids through science, technology, engineering, and math via productive struggle. So our goal is to set up the opportunity for students to get things wrong before they get them right and build confidence in their critical thinking and problem solving skills and their adaptability as they go into an ever-changing workforce. We do that through hands-on STEM projects and then also a connection and understanding of career pathways. There's many other details to that, but that's the higher level overview of what we do. In terms of kind of how Rosie started and how it came to be and a little bit about myself, my background is in initially communications. I worked in the political sphere for a long time, doing digital comms, both here and overseas. And then I got recruited into an organization called the World Association of Nuclear Operators, WANO for short, because we can't keep saying that all the time. But essentially, every operating nuclear power plant in the world is a member, and they operate under a confidentiality clause to improve safety above and beyond regulatory. And I was brought in to build out digital communications and some internal communications work. And one of the first things you do when you're going to communicate with an audience is pull this data set of who your audience actually is. And when I pulled that industry data set, I was very kind of shocked is not the right word, but it was obvious that there was very clearly a big representation of men in the field, particularly coming out of very specific sectors. A lot of them came off of Navy boats, and they were all kind of around a similar age because they, again, had been recruited during that timeline into this new and emerging field. And we were specifically looking at conversations around safety culture and how do you report smaller problems before they become bigger problems. Long story short, I went to our managing director and said, we can change culture and have a conversation with culture talking to this very specific audience, but you're probably going to have greater success if you actually start to diversify that audience and bring in additional inputs into that conversation for that output to happen. And my managing director at the time, a lovely man, sent me all over the world to talk to women who had become nuclear engineers themselves and understand kind of how they got there when they were so underrepresented in the space. And I got deeply immersed in the conversation around the STEM pipeline. I like pathways, but it's what we talk about. And what kept coming up was this disengagement that happened in middle school. And there was tons of programs. There's still good programs. There's still room for more programs that started at middle school and worked to kind of effectively like save the ship from sinking when they were disengaging. And my question kept coming up of, well, why are we losing them en masse in middle school? I don't think they wake up when they turn 11 and go, this isn't really for me anymore. That didn't make sense. And so I'm a data person. I'm sure that'll come out in this conversation, but I went on a big old deep dive about what the data that was out there, the research that was out there could tell me about why girls were, disengaging by nearly 30% in middle school. And there wasn't anything concrete, but what was out there was pieces of other data. So girls are academically ahead in elementary school. They find, eventually everybody kind of evens out, but they're significantly ahead of their male counterparts in an elementary school space. There's really good research around gifted and talented youth. So kids who are advanced from the curriculum and their relationship to learning things they'd never learned before. Usually it is, no, thank you, because they want to be very quickly good at it if it's not immediate. And then there's similarly about a 30% drop in confidence with young girls around that middle school age bracket as well. And so we took all of that data set and went, well, what seems to be happening here is the opportunity to build confidence that you don't have to have it right the first time. Because if you sit down in a classroom and the curriculum is there to a place where it's not a big stretch for you to get there, and there's exceptions to everything. But overall, if that's your experience, you start to hardwire that in order to be good at something, in order to be smart at a subject, it almost needs to feel innate and not like too big of a stretch. And you start to associate confidence with that. And then long story short, all that data was kind of percolating in my brain. How do we give girls a space for productive struggle? I was living in the UK at the time, and I had my daughter. And during that time, my family actually relocated back stateside. But in the wondrous world of European maternity leave, I had a year's worth of paid maternity leave, even though I gave my notice that I was moving to another country. That's a conversation for another day. But I had this time and I had this idea, and I had a library down the street from me and a small child. And I started to draft out a curriculum, because what did I do? I was a person who took complex subject matters and explained them to non-subject matter experts in the space to get them towards an idea. And so specifically narrowed that in of productive struggle, and how do we give spaces for stretch to get things wrong before you get them right? How do we make it fun? And how do we package that around communications of what does that mean if you like this stuff? Where can you go with it? What can you do with it? How can you see yourself within it? And so I wrote out a curriculum, and then I joined a moms group called Moms of North Arlington, which is a moms listserv here in Northern Virginia. And I kind of told people what I was working on and said, I want to pull together a list of teachers. I want anybody who wants to get involved to come and get involved. I got connected with an awesome mom who actually, Katie Reeder, who built out our high school program in years later and worked to build the foundations of what we do. And she was a former admissions officer for Johns Hopkins University, and so had specifically been recruiting girls into engineering fields and other fields within STEM. And what did that look like? And we sent out a list and got 10 area local teachers to come in. I fed them lunch. I gave them copies of the curriculum and said, rip it apart. Like, this is not a space we have to occupy. It's a space we want to know if we can bring a value add. And at that time, the feedback from all of those teachers was, this is everything we wish we could do in our classroom. We don't have the resources to do that. That resource conversation point is actually, there's multiple points to that, which I'd be happy to get into, that we've worked to really solve over time of program delivery. So we took over the local library, the same one I was going to story time with my then 7-month-old, and said, hey, if we fund it, can we take over the library on Saturdays and offer these Saturday programs and see if it works? And they said yes. And then again, the moms group is in Northern Virginia, which is a very randomly connected place in the US map of systems. And somebody had a family foundation and said, I'll fund the first program. And so that's how it started. And now we're over 60,000 kids delivered later across 15 states. But we always say that we're national, but with a hyper-local focus. So all those communities are very closely responded to based on how they operate. And that's kind of how it happened. It was an idea that, we put some scaffolding around and shared with the world, and the world kind of gave us a big old hug and helped us enter into the space. And now we're just doing that anywhere and everywhere that we can.
So within your research, can you share some highlights from that experience of why young girls lose that confidence at the middle school age? And is that something that's cross-cultural, meaning like, or maybe cultural is not the right way, but in different, because you were in the UK when you started the research.
Yeah.
So is it similar across different countries and regions with women? Like, why do you think that is?
Yeah, I can speak much more directly within kind of from the academic structure within a Western lens, which is where the research was focused, right? So the data sets didn't necessarily go outside of that scope. And then additionally, I can speak to the fact that I had kind of the qualitative anecdotal conversations with women from across the world. The women in industry all reflected that similar space. So when you start to tell the story of kind of the research and how we then rooted our approach, it was, you know, you got praised in elementary school, you sit in your chair, you get an A on the test, you get all of the rah-rah shush-gamba that comes from that, right? There's a higher expectation of the way that you operate within the space, and that starts to get kind of cemented into the space that you operate. And then you go into middle school, and it's a much bigger environment. And the subject matter is maybe a little less innate. There are people who wake up and do trig, and I love that for them, right? Or there are people who wake up and like immediately are living their best life in the land of geometry. Others have never really been presented with those concepts before and need to learn them, right? Need to understand that they're going to have to figure out their approach to learning, their understanding of that information. What does it look like? But that's the space where you might not get the A on the first test, right? You might suddenly get, God forbid, a B, right? Or a C, or you fail it. Like so many options of that. I mean, usually when I say that, you can see the women that I talk to like visibly shiver. They're like, oh no, like we're not going to fail the test, right? Like, no, thank you. And you have more selections and options. So you start to then have and you have all of the kind of noise that's around you as well. That's, oh, I'm not good at math, or math's not my thing, or whatever it is that you're getting from your peer groups and society as a whole, or the toys you played with, or the options you have, all of that factors in. But for us, the research really pointed to the fact that what you had was not the space to be comfortable when the answer wasn't quickly tangible, right? And the space to be comfortable to go and say, you know what, I don't know. And I'm going to figure it out. And I need the space to figure it out. And the whole system really isn't set up for that. So, and everybody benefits from productive struggle. Boys just tend to have the opportunity more because there's that little bit of that differentiation in where they are in relationship to curriculum. They get to stretch, they get to grow, they get to build confidence in the fact that they can stretch and grow. So maybe, you know, when they go and take a test and they get the C, or they take the homework and they get the D, they go, okay, well, I got to figure it out and I'll get the next thing, whatever. It's the same reason why women don't apply for jobs unless they're 180% qualified, right? It all leads into that. And so, yeah, the lens is very much kind of through a Western research data capture, but anecdotally across the world, that was a truth that was reflected by every woman I spoke with.
Well, for you, so the term productive struggle, where does that come from? Is that something that was something you kind of put together, or did you come across that term in some of your research that you were doing?
So the short answer is I don't know. I cannot take credit that it came out of my mouth. It's something that's used pretty, it's a growing term that's used in academia, for instance, about the way that you're building opportunities. It is much more common now than it was 10 years ago. It's often a term that I say, even when I'm talking to educators, and they'll say, oh, I've never used that term before. So it is not a term that I can honestly say I opened a book and saw it, right? It was a term that we've used from the beginning about talking about the opportunity to get things wrong before you get them right, the opportunity to build your confidence through building the muscle, right, of learning something new. You know, we always say, I may not know, but I know I can figure it out. And that terminology is productive struggle. So I will not openly say like I created it, but I can't tell you where I heard it. And I know that I'm often the person sharing it for the first time.
No, I like the term. And what I'm normally used to hearing is failing forward. Like, how do we teach people to fail forward and get right back up? But yeah, I think it's a cool way of saying, yeah, you can struggle, but you can still be productive and keep going even after you fail after the first time.
Yeah. And sometimes failure feels very finite, and it can be a very closed off term for a lot of people. When you say you got to be okay to fail, there's particularly women that I know are like, I fail and you don't use me as a vendor again. I fail and you don't talk to me again. I fail and something goes wrong, and immediately, because I wasn't in this space before, I'm the first, I'm discredited. So failure is a term. I'm not afraid of the term of failure, but I think it carries with it a lot of additional connotations that get lost in what we're actually asking people to be open to. Right? It's more so than not. It's not I think everybody has a fear of completely, falling on your face and it going to a complete disaster. And I don't think that's anybody's objective in a space, right? You'd be like, you gotta be okay to fail. And it's like, you have X amount of budget you're dealing with. Please don't, right? Like, that's not what I'm seeking. But productive struggle, the space to say, and I had this conversation with my team today, we're working on building some new formulas within our tracking systems. And I said to my team, like, look, when I know how roughly the system works, but I had to Google what the formula was, right? I was comfortable with the fact that I didn't have the answer. And it wasn't, we can't do that because I don't know all those formulas. It was the space to be confident to go and seek the information and be confident enough to show up and say, okay, I'll do it, even if I don't know how to do it yet. And that's productive struggle, right? The space to be comfortable to get things wrong before you get them right. But the end objective is still the right? It's not, we're okay just, completely dropping the ball.
Right.
Because I will never be comfortable with that. It might happen and I hope it doesn't, but that's not what we're encouraging. We're encouraging the space to be comfortable outside of your comfort zone.
And I like that because if you look at the statistics when it comes to women in engineering and manufacturing, so as a whole, we represent around 30%. I feel like there was a conversation I was part of and they said we dropped a little bit in those numbers. That statistic is very vague though, because it doesn't really break down where those percentages fall, like in terms of what fields women are in. But then when you look at the engineering side, I think globally we're around like 15 or 16% representation.
Yeah.
And within engineering, it is a lot of like trial and error and creating something that doesn't work the first time and then trying to figure out where it didn't go right. And then, okay, what's the solution to fix this? And what do I need to adapt or change within the design to make it successful? And if men have that encouragement and support as they're growing up with the productive struggle, it makes sense that there's more men in this field than there are women. And yeah, so I really like the term productive struggle. And I just wanted to kind of highlight the wording of it because I feel like a lot of people will connect to that. And with the finite, I have to have more coffee today. The finiteness of the term failure, I think, is a great point that you got out. I want to talk about those early days then where you reached out to the women group in Virginia, and then you guys came together, you got the funding, and you were basically in the library. What sort of conversations were happening in those moments? Like, what were the expectations? What surprised you? How did the first group of students that you took on, how did they react to the process? Like, what were some of those initial things that happened?
The crazy thing is some of the kids who were in the initial program, I'm still connected with today and are pursuing degrees in STEM, right? But particularly mechanical engineering, which is really interesting from that end. But we initially had a group of 36 students. So we did 3 sets of 12, K to 2nd, 3rd through 5th, and 6th through 8th. So everything's subdivided by age appropriateness, because to have a productive struggle, you have to have an age appropriate struggle, right? We're not just struggling for the sake of struggling. We need to have growth within our struggles. So we had those 3 age groups, and we taught them over every Saturday for 4 weeks. And the same way that we got the word out about the program and what we were doing, we sent it to those same moms groups and did registration. And then we partnered with the library and did registration through their website. And some of the surprising things were that we had a full house and a wait list before we ever even launched. So the need out there of seeking that, and it was very clear, and it wasn't just like a STEM program. It was a STEM program with a focus on productive struggle. Like we have always been the same thing on the tin forever. And now more and more productive struggles coming out, particularly in the age of AI, but like we have always been through that lens of what we're focused on. And so we had this full house of awesome kids who came in and got involved. I'm not going to lie. The first two things that we hear in any Saturday program, without fail, it comes out of somebody's mouth is this is hard and it's not fair, because they haven't been in those spaces before, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes that emotionally comes out through tears and then we work through it and we build it. Like that's the productive struggle of it. Others, that's not the way they express their emotion and they're just frustrated and don't want to talk to you, right? Like everybody has their own ways that manifests. But they go through the process, and in our Saturday programs, which are different than our in-school programs, but still the same core project structure, they have 2 hours to figure it out. So we do a hands-on interactive lesson, and then we have space for build, right? We have space to get things wrong before you get them right. They work from a completed example, not a set of step-by-step instructions. So there's a clear end objective, but not necessarily a way to get there. And through that process, you have to start to ask questions. And it's not just, I don't know what to do. That's not a question that I can resource beyond telling you step by step how to activate it. But you can say to me, okay, I did this part. Now I don't know how this connects. And that entire process in a classroom with us comes through question and answer. And that's different based on abilities, right? Some people, that's something that is productive struggle for them, and other kids need additional, some hands-on support to get them to the place where they'll take the jump, and that's all varied. But they go from, this is hard, it's not fair, tears, not wanting to talk to you, and then they find little moments of success, or they get it right, or they, by the end of it, they've completed their project build, and they've gone from I can't to look what I did. And those are the moments when we're building that confidence and the ability to do it again. And you start to hardwire that relationship to learning, that I have an example to point back to. And in the second class, you go through it again and you go back and you go, last time you told me you couldn't do it and you did it. So let's try a different approach, right? And so we start to change that process. And then parents, we also brought in women in industry to come and talk to them as role models, and additionally to parents. And the feedback from them was, God, I wish I had this when I was a kid. And we hear that all the time. And I'm like, me too, but I'm glad we're here today, right? That we get to do this. Right. And I hope that one day, like, our programs don't even need to exist, because we start to build the system that does that innately, right? For everybody. That's the beauty of running a nonprofit, is your job is literally to run yourself out of work, right? And out of business, right? To solve the problem. So yeah, it was very much, where has this been? There's frustration at the initial jump. And sometimes there's even, like, we also don't let parents in the room, because parents don't want to see their kids struggling, particularly if the kid next to them isn't struggling as much, right? Or as they see as much, or struggling in a different way. And so we remove them from that space so the kids can also have the opportunity to get it wrong before they get it right. And their parent isn't tying their knot, so they're catching up and on the same timeline with the next step. And so we remove that process, and they get to build that. And then separately, we resource the kids and the parents to be able to have conversations about what they did when they go home. So
I think that's important, because I compare it to sports. So right now my 2 boys are in baseball, and there are a lot of parents that want to interfere with the coaching process. And it's like, no, you have to let them learn how to be coached by other individuals so that they can get confident in the process of, like, being an athlete. Mm-hmm. And, there's a lot of parents out there who want their kids to be resilient, but then they interfere with the process of making them resilient. So I like the fact that you're kicking the parents out of the room, because then I think the kids are even more comfortable being themselves too, because I feel like they have limitations that they feel like, oh, I can't act this way if my parents are around. I have to act a certain way. But then when the parents aren't around, they actually act how they are. So I like that. You kick them out of the room. In terms of, I want to get back to the difference between productive struggle and failure. You mentioned it before, where, like, failure has this kind of definitive end to it, where productive struggle, there's room for adaptability and flexibility. How are you making that click with parents of older generations who might have that mindset of, failure and productive? Like, how do you help change their mindset of the two differences between productive struggle and failure? Because I feel like with older generations, there's that excuse, well, they're set in their ways. But we really need to educate parents in terms of, not just with the opportunities that are available in the STEM career pathways, but also, what it takes to develop the skill set in younger generations so that they can be successful. How are you connecting the dots and helping change that mindset with the older generations?
Yeah, for us, it comes down to communications, right? Which is amazing to me, and how much that comes back into kind of the root of everything that I do.
Right.
But the patience to have the conversation of what the results were in the build process, right? And so when we get to interact with the parent, we get to come back, and it's interesting too, because we now also send STEM kits to houses where kids engage virtually with us. So the parent is a little bit closer, right? Or they were in a different experience. And or a teacher who we're supporting in the dynamic of what productive struggle looks like. For some teachers, it's not a concept that they're used to embracing. They're not against it, but it's just they got to get to objective in the classroom. And so they're so used to doing things. And so I'll give you an example from that end. We were working with a kindergarten teacher, and we were doing a project which is bird feeders, because one of the learning standards in kindergarten in Virginia is habitats and how animals live. And so we make this bird feeder and we adapt habitat. We have all conversations about it. But the productive struggle in that, is going to seem really basic, but it's huge for the kids. They have to hole punch the cardboard tube on two sides, and they have to tie a knot on both ends with the string. Most of these kids have never tied a knot before, right? Or used a hole punch. I mean, it's a grip strength ring. There's a lot of it. You have to line them up. You have to not, get it off the edge so the hole's open to the top. There's like many things that we take for granted as adults who have done it before, right? When somebody hasn't, as a part of their own productive struggle. And we actually went in to deliver this with a classroom teacher. This is when we were first kind of going in to deliver for classrooms. Now they're designed so that teachers can just implement without us. And the classroom teacher went, okay, I'm going to come around and tie your knots, because the kids just kind of stared at us. And we paused and, said, look, we love that you're here to support us. Like, we have the time, we've built it in. We'd really like for them to work on tying their knots. And she said, it might be really chaotic. Like, she was more worried that we were guests in her space and it might not be what we wanted it to be. And we communicate back and said, that's okay. Like, that is productive struggle. We promise that kids are going to tie the knot by the time they leave here today. And in kindergarten, that doesn't mean you just go tie a knot. That's not a productive struggle, right? You demo how to tie the knot. You talk about the rabbit going through the hole and you pull, and then you go over with some and you go, okay, you got it there. Now where is it going to go? And they go, oh, it goes through. And with some who have different fine motor abilities, you actually pull that string through, and what is, from that end. And at the end of the class, the teacher came up to us and said, I can't believe they all tied knots. Right? She had saw these kids go from something that she didn't think was going to happen at all. She was like, y'all are crazy. I'm never inviting you back again. Right? To the end of it, where they had all figured it out. And there were questions, and you have an approach to the way you're doing that. And now when those kids go into classrooms, there's a knot tying guide. There's our language of how we use. It's in big red letters on the thing at the top that says, your kids are going to struggle tying knots. It's meant to happen that way. Like, it is built for that to happen. And that's all communications, setting expectation, working through it, making the proof point, being comfortable with it, right? And being comfortable to say, like, that's where all your strengths come from. And don't get me wrong, the narrative of everything around us, I would say everything that a kid and a parent engage with from a structural perspective from K through 12th grade is getting a grade, getting it quickly, mastering a subject, and having a passion project that goes with it, right? Everything is geared towards this very linear, hyper-focused niche dialogue that you will be the best at this thing because that's what makes you competitive or what it is. And then we go out into the workforce and we go, and anybody talks who's like had any kind of success talks about how they didn't follow a linear pathway. And they gained all of their strength from all these different things and inputs and experiences that they had that they didn't think they were going to have. And they don't match. And then we wonder why people have struggled between those transitions, or even we have struggles with parents being able to resource the struggle. Well, the infrastructure isn't necessarily designed to support that. So that's where Rosie comes in to start to inject that into the system and within the existing system structure. And it's kind of don't tell me no, tell me how approach of the way that we operate into an ecosystem.
Right.
And then also just flat out having very clear conversations to say, your kid's got to get comfortable in discomfort. That doesn't mean that you're always out of your comfort zone and you pick that every time and that's always your choice. Like, we were having a conversation on this about introversion and extroversion. Like, you're allowed to be an introvert. You also got to know how to step up into a space and make connections when you need to. But when you have the option, you're allowed to go home and sit by yourself and be quiet. Like, that's okay, right? But we have to build those skill sets so that we can operate and move through spaces. And more often than not, a lot of parents, their initial space is, oh, I don't want my kid to be uncomfortable, or I don't want my kid to have to struggle, or I don't know how to do that doesn't feel like chaos. And so it comes down to communications.
I just don't understand like how any parent, I do, because I'm a parent, and like I don't want my kids to go through struggles either, but that struggle is going to help build that resilience and confidence. So I'm glad that you're connecting those dots. So you talked about the disconnection between, you know, what kids are learning in school and then by the time they get into the workforce. What are some of the things that you know you have worked on or you are currently working on to bridge those gaps? Because I've been in like high schools, and usually that's the stage where, okay, you're in high school. Now you need to have your whole entire life figured out. You need to know what colleges you want to go to. You need to know what jobs you want to apply to. And then some of these students who are going from, you know, the high school level to work right away in some of like, whether it's CNC machining or welding, they're missing the mark in terms of what the industry is demanding and what they need. And a lot of these companies are spending a lot of time training because what they learned wasn't up to par with what's actually going on in industry. So are you having those types of conversations when it comes to your curriculum and how it ties into what is actually happening in industry now?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of what we set the foundation of how do we build your learning style and how do we build your foundational skills to approaching information? Exactly to your point about on-the-job training, that's, I would argue, is always going to be happening because technologies are constantly evolving. Companies are restructuring the way that they are. I mean, jobs are not the same today that they're going to be in tomorrow, let alone 5 hours from now. And that's kind of the pace of what we exist with work. And so what often happens is when you talk to industry, they'll come in and say, I want to teach kids specifically to use the CNC machine like this. And I'm like, no, you don't. Because you don't have enough control of that training for it to provide the output that you're actively seeking. The investment of that and that connection with an industry is, how do you want your worker to be able to approach that information? How quickly can they learn it? How adaptable are they as they, you know, get new technology entered into the system or experience a problem, right? Can they independently problem solve? Do they know how to navigate a system, right? Do they know how to follow protocol? Do they know how to not follow protocol, but communicate that effectively if you're in an innovation space, right? What does that look like? And so with the work that Rosie does, we start at kindergarten. We go all the way through 12th grade. The programs evolve appropriately based on where kids are at with that. In kindergarten through 8th grade, we are teaching children how to learn and how to be comfortable, to be adaptable. We're teaching confidence in your ability to think critically and to problem solve. We are not going in and setting a narrative, and I'll use a current example, and saying, you must go in and be a computer software engineer. And when you become a computer software engineer, this is the job you will go into, and this is the exact thing that will happen. Well, we did that, and now we have a bunch of kids who can't get a job because the system has changed and the process of it has changed. But all of those kids, what did they learn? If you can debug code, you can solve a problem, right? If you can write out code, right? You can create a solution to a problem. You can design. Those are skill sets that are transferable, applicable, and highly valuable. But if your narrative is narrowed to this one output of that, your ability to then be comfortable reapplying that in different spaces or adapting it is diminished because it's not the way that it was set up. So I'm literally sound like a broken record with this, but it's the communications around it. What is your narrative about your style of learning? What is your narrative about your adaptability? And what is your narrative to apply your skill sets in ways that are going to be the most lucrative, effective for yourself? And that always then usually nets out also for your employer, right? If you're trying to then bring in that ROI. And so a lot of times within industry and with conversations, that's the conversation we're having, but we're also connecting it to an understanding of what is happening. So a lot of the work, when I mentioned we're national but hyper local, when we work with industry and we work directly with the community in their backyard. We are putting their logo on the packaging specifically to say, when you drive by, and I have one on the floor here, hold on. Right? When you drive by Carlisle Construction, right, and you've created this project and an understanding of the breadth, what the manufacturing industry does in your region, you have young children. When they learn something new, anybody who has a young child, you're gonna hear it like 25,000 times before they're done talking to you about it. Like, it's how they operate. And you're like, oh my God, you told me this like already. Thank you, but love you. We want them to go in and build that project, know about Carlisle Construction, know what they do. And then every time they drive past that building with you and they look at that logo, they go, Mom, there's Carlisle Construction. Do you remember that they did this and we did that? And then it becomes part of their narrative. It becomes part of where they're aiming, and it becomes part of their understanding of what opportunity looks like within a stone's throw of where they live. And so you're not coming in and talking to them necessarily. You are as well, but your first conversation with them isn't at 18 when you're trying to get them to come into a system and they've hardwired a lot of their relationship to learning. They've written their narrative about where they are and where they might go, which is a lot harder to change. Not impossible at all. Like, we could have a whole nother conversation about shifting mindsets in adulthood, right? But It's harder to do it than when you get to build it at the base, right? It's harder when you have to disassemble the IKEA furniture and reassemble it because the screws are all like already piloted for the other screw. You can still do it, but it's not as easy. And it's harder to make it stable and secure over time. And so that narrative of like, what are you doing? What is your recruitment pipeline? Oh, you have an internship for high school students. I want kids to know about that in elementary school. And I definitely want their parents to know about that, not only for themselves, like their children and where their children are going and what options are available to them. But in a lot of instances, in a lot of communities, the parents don't know what opportunities are available in their backyard, and they might also be your recruitment pool.
Right. So there was a company that I interviewed. She's no longer with the company, but it was within the foundry industry, and she was part of the marketing team at the time when she was working with this company. But she helped develop a children's book that they have available on their website that basically tells the story from a kid's perspective, what the foundry industry is. And then she also created a bunch of like coloring templates and different STEM science experiments that you could do at home with your children. But if you don't know about the foundry industry or specifically that company, you're not going to Google it and come to their website. Like, you pretty much had to be local. But one of the things that she did do is she's like, I would go to the local elementary schools and I would teach kids about how to melt down chocolate and put them in a plastic mold and make these chocolate molds. And she's like, it's the same basic steps for how a foundry works and how we make molds out of steel and different types of metal. And I feel like one of the limitations as adults and as, leaders of these companies, we assume that our industry is too complex to get kids to really understand it. But with your example of like how to tie a knot in your shoe, just getting those basic motor skills down, eventually that's going to lead to either something in welding or maybe in CNC machining or something like soldering. Like, it can get connected. So do you have any like specific example of a conversation, whether that's with a teacher, a parent, or a company that you worked with, where there was that aha moment with them? I know you shared the shoe tying one, but I want to try to, showcase like look, it's really not that hard. We're making it harder. But you've kind of found that solution of like, no, it's really easy to connect these dots.
Yeah.
Do you have an example of that where you're like, it's really not that hard? And like, whether it's a leader of a company or whether it's a parent where they're like, oh yeah, you're right, it isn't that hard. Do you have an example of that?
I have many, so I'll try to like narrow in what they look like. We work with a large technology company that came in and wanted us to talk about a very specific part of their product. And they came in and they were like, how can you make this? And they came in and they brought in engineers who were going to help us build the project out. And it was going to be this very technical thing. And our feedback to them was, we're talking to K to fifth graders, and it's still valuable for you to talk to them, but you don't need them to be doctorate professionals in this field right now. And your field is going to change by the time you get to the place of recruitment. Mm-hmm. So we took that conversation, and with kindergarten, we honestly do it through 12th grade because the 12th graders really still are obsessed with making their name in binary code. But we have a project that is binary code wearables, and you code your name into binary code, which is, 0 and 1s, but we use black and clear beats. And the whole conversation of that is a computer is an electronic at its base. In order for us to have a conversation with it, we have to convert our language into its language. Its language is on and off electrical signals. And how do you then create electrical signals to then give it a message or a pattern or whatever? And with little kids, it's pattern recognition, and they walk away with the fact that computers speak a different language, and we have to learn their language to communicate with them. With a middle school kid, that's an understanding of the difference between a base 2 and a base 10 system, right? We count on 10 because we have 10 fingers, right? The computer talks in 2 because it has 2, right? That's on and off. That's it. And with older kids, right, we're literally working in and like building out that 1s and 0s code understanding, and how does that translate to the alphabet, and how does it become pixels on your computer, and like all of the other layers that go with that. But that basic understanding, and then having an understanding that this industry, this is how they operate. The baseline of what they do is all of this, is a couple of fold. A, it's awareness of that industry. B, it's awareness of that brand, because branding is important in those instances of how you recognize it. But C, there's a confidence factor of, I know what they do, or I can tell you about binary code. And we had kids walking around, kindergarten, first graders, walking around with their binary code keychain on. We came back into the school and did another one, and there was a girl walking out of class, and her binary code keychain was hanging from her backpack. And her friend went in that, and I just happened to be there for the moment. And she goes, "That's my name in computer language." She was like, "Did you know I speak computer language?" And the friend was like, "What?" Like fascinated. And then she, in that moment, mentioned the brand. And she was like, "Yeah, we did this with them, and I'm going to go and work there one day." Right. And those are they're moments, and they're anecdotal, but they're important. Think about the narratives and stories from your childhood and how much they were a part of that.
Right.
We also sometimes too will go in and do our projects with teams, like with companies, as a part of a professional development opportunity. And they have their own productive struggle moments. And they're like, "Well, you're going to make me build an art bot? Like, I don't even know how to build a basic circuit." I'm like, "You're going to be great." And they themselves go from the journey to I can't to look what I did. And in that moment, we get to also say, but imagine if you got this moment when you were in kindergarten, first and second grade, and how much opportunity that is just for you to be comfortable. It doesn't mean you'd be in a different spot. We're not like going in and saying like, you'd be so much better off. But it's going in and saying, like, just think about like the feeling of that in terms of access to something you hadn't done before. And that's really powerful. So sometimes we have to go in and give them the moment, but more often than not, it's just, again, being comfortable saying, I don't think that's actually what you want. Here's what we do. And here's the data that we show that works effectively with this. Let's see how we approach this this way. And we'll pull data back and share that with you as we receive it.
So there's a lot of opportunities in engineering and manufacturing that people can select from as a career pathway. And some aren't technical, some are really technical. So how does Rosie Riveters select which things to focus on in terms of what sort of curriculum you're creating? Like, are you looking at the more technical side of things? Are you looking at the more mechanical side of things? Like who are you talking to? Who's on your board? Where are you getting the information from? Again, you mentioned too, like it could be regional based, determining, because different areas in the United States specifically have different types of manufacturing that are local. So how are you, like, that's a lot of information for you. So how are you selecting the right company? Or maybe the right companies is not the way to say that, but like, how are you selecting which partners to work with so that you're getting those basic fundamentals to include in your curriculum, even at such a younger age in elementary school? And then
so our product development is rooted in usually learning standard for the schools and the program partners that we're supporting. That doesn't mean that we're going in and saying we will hit this objective. We create fun hands-on STEM experiences that come from many different places. We have a neuron project where we make a neuron tree with a multiple like sliding switch, and that came out of the fact that there's a piece of technology called backyard brains where you can like move people's hands by moving your own. We were like, we must build a project from this, right? So sometimes it can come from there. Sometimes it can come from, we want to explore this particular standard of learning that the school has shared with us that kids are struggling with, and we want to make a project to support that. In terms of the industry connection, we have over 120 hands-on STEM projects that then get adapted to like a million different spaces. And we're working with a car manufacturer right now. And one of our groups was a kindergarten group, and we're working with Girl Scouts. And the Girl Scouts came to us and said, well, we're doing science and nature badges, and we need to do a science and nature project for it to work with what our objectives are right now. We did bioluminescent bug nightlights, right? So it's bioluminescent tape. And we talked about bioluminescence. And we very easily with kindergartners also talked about how understanding bioluminescence and understanding these biomechanics are used in the car industry to make headlights and how to make the dashboard glow. And now when those kids get in the car and they see the dashboard glow, they go, that's bioluminescence, and it's like the lightning bug. Or they see the lightning bug and they connect it to the car, right? And so it's not that we're going in and saying like, this is how specifically we're engineering this dash. But I can make connections to the moments of the things that kids are going to have tangible experiences with. So more often than not, 95% of the time, we are adjusting the narrative of the project for the industry, because the core of science, technology, engineering, and math is in most manufacturers and most industries, right? A lot of people are doing the same math. A lot of people are using the same approach. It's the basic stuff, right? That is where it's being copy and pasted and adapted. And when you're working with kids in those spaces, the confidence of that is also important to go in and learn the more technical stuff as they pursue it. And then in terms of what we do in a region, it's what companies are there, right? So those kids will walk by that car factory, that car manufacturing facility, and they will be able to then see that logo and be a part of that and tell that story. And so in terms of like our team, our curriculum is honestly kind of in some ways like the creativity of mine and my team's brain. And then we have a core scaffolding of how that fits in. What's the productive struggle? Everything must be hands-on. Everything must have like what we call a continually interactive element. So we use experiments and projects for lessons. When we're doing something to go like that, the kids are actually doing, they're physically building something. That can be creating code in a computer, and then they're having a physical output of that. That's like the smallest part of what we do, probably. But it's, they have something that they physically create as a part of it. So when we talk about bioluminescence, we use glow in the dark beads, and we use glow in the dark tape, and then we activate it with UV lights, and they flew all around the room with their bioluminescent things, and we showed them pictures of lightning bugs, and it was great. That's awesome. That's, again, the communications part of it. How do you tell the story? How do you make it fun? And then, that's kind of the great, I would say the best value added bonus of my life. I've always been a crafter. I've always liked to create things. And I lived in a communication space where occasionally I got to make a really cool experience where I got to design it. Now, we get to do it less and less because we have such a good archive of stuff we're pulling from. So we don't have to constantly be creating new things. But but it's very fun and probably the most rewarding thing that I get to do, other than getting it into the hands of a kid and watching them go from I can't to look what I did.
That's awesome. One of the major things that's kind of changing our industry now is artificial intelligence. I'm sure you hear about it all the time. And, I hear constantly like, oh, AI is going to take this job away, or AI is going to dumb down our society. How is the whole essence of artificial intelligence affecting what Rosie Riveters is doing, either in a negative or positive way, or both? Like, how are you working with it? Is there ways that it's maybe taking away some of that hands-on experience from the kids? Like, how are you approaching it?
So we effectively have doubled down on what we have been rooted in from the beginning, which is the value of hands-on learning, the value of productive struggle, and the opportunity to get it wrong before you get it right. And that's not like a backlash. Those are the foundational skills of artificial intelligence. A lot of this, the hype and the panic around AI, which is that we have to teach kids to be AI literate. If anybody has played around with their ChatGPT, and this is one part, so it's part of it, right? Their LLM, but like if you've played around with your ChatGPT or your Claude, it is designed for you to be able to use it, right? You get better at prompting, but you learn as you go. Kids are digital natives nowadays, right? Nobody goes to typing class anymore. You just know how to type, right? I went to a class where I had to learn how to use my keyboard. Keyboarding does not exist anymore because they're digital natives in that way. The goal is that you are able to utilize a tool, but in order to utilize a tool, you have to have skill sets to know how to use it. And that doesn't mean, so we're building those skill sets, and those foundational skills, particularly in the K through 8th grade space, when we're building that foundational learning, are AI skills, right? How are you approaching a problem? How are you breaking down that problem? How are you communicating your needs and relationship to solve that problem? That's all happening in what we do. So we haven't removed it, but we also have conversations about AI ethics and AI and getting kids to think about what that means in the world they're operating. So I'll give you a quick example. We have a project where it's called ArtBots. We make a robot that draws, right? It's a 3-volt motor and you attach things in it. So like a scribble bot. And with our younger kids, we use it to talk about the basics of circuitry. With our middle kids, we talk about electromagnetism. And with our older kids, we talk about AI ethics. So the question when they build is, who is the artist, the machine, or the engineer? Who gets credit? Because once you turn that machine on, it's making what it's making. Now you can get in, and this is where we want the conversations to go. I can, apply my knowledge of physics and apply my knowledge of all of these things and get a very specific output with that art bot. But with the way they're engaging with it, they're not. Everything has different art. Everything has a different output. And we, have the conversation of what would it be like if you applied code, et cetera, like all of those pieces. I had an hour-long dialogue with 100 middle school students in the South Bronx in January of this year, specifically off the back of that project, where somebody said, well, I'm upset because people who are using AI to write music are winning Grammys. And we had a conversation that went back and said, well, what about a mixing board? Before, we thought there weren't going to be drummers anymore because you could press a button and play a drum beat. You can use it to synthesize. And now they're different in terms of the way that they apply, but these are the dialogues. They had a girl say, I want to be a doctor. What if I can't be a doctor anymore because people can just ask the ChatGPT? And my answer to her was, well, what data set is building the information for output? Last time I checked, women weren't really represented in a whole lot of medical research. I'd rather not have it learning predictive models based on data that doesn't represent me. Right. And you can be scared of that. Or you can say, I know I want to go into a medical space. Potentially, I can get the output very quickly of the existing data set. And then maybe I have more time with my patient to add to that data set. But the dialogue isn't coming from a space of saying like, AI for the win, or like AI is the worst thing you've ever seen. It's talking about awareness of this space. How are they thinking and moving through this space? What opportunities does it present? Where might they want to have reservations? And that's when we get into a space when kids can have that dialogue. I'm very much a person that if you want to get rid of screens in K through 5th, I will jump on your bandwagon and be a part of that with you, right? The value of that learning time is very important, and they're digital natives as it is. They're not going to be lost if they suddenly have an access to a laptop in middle school and haven't beforehand. But that's a whole other conversation. I'm happy to have them back and have it, or with anybody else who wants to have it. But It's doubling down on hands-on learning. So we haven't changed our hands-on learning. We have brought in awareness and conversations. We do talk about the fact that those skills are skills for AI and what do they look like. And we talk to kids about that as young as kindergarten. What does that mean? Because they hear AI at home, or they talk to their Alexa. Or one of the things they love is I'll say, does anybody's mom have to repeat themselves more often when they talk to their Alexa or their HomePod or whatever? And they're like, yeah, my mom yells at it all the time, but it listens to my dad. And I'm like, yeah, because 80% of the data set that it was trained on is a male voice. It doesn't understand our frequency. So if you have a higher frequency voice, if you talk to it lower, it will respond to you. And they have those moments because they talk to the, hey, Google, play whatever, or hey, Alexa, play whatever. And they have those experiences. We, in terms of like operations of Rosie, we use it all the time. We actually just worked with Amazon Web Services as a part of like a focused volunteer engagement. And now because we use Google Sheets for everything that we do, our inventory is all now has, we are able to talk to the Google HomePod and say, hey, Google, add 35 motors to box 23, and it will update our spreadsheet. Or I can go into our spreadsheet and say, based on inventory, how many art bots can I build right now? And that's all running in the background of our AI and our prompts and the way that we built that. And that's great. And then also from an accessibility standpoint, it makes it a lot easier to respond to community need. We had a third grade teacher come to us. We've always had our stuff available in English or Spanish. And then we just open up requests if somebody needs something. And the third grade teacher came to us and said, look, I love that you have this written in Spanish, but I have many students in my class who are not yet literate in English or Spanish. So it wasn't accessible from that end. It took literally less than 15 minutes for us to turn those instructions into a voiceover in Spanish with a visual overlay. I can't argue that increased accessibility for students, and I might not have been able to respond to that as a small nonprofit had you asked me before that tech was available. So we're pretty open with that dialogue, but we're also open to that dialogue that we know how to leverage that and provide that response because we've had the productive struggle at the baseline to then be able to use the tool effectively and also bring the innovation that comes through productive struggle of your unique experience for what that also is a part of is an important part of the inputs for the outputs if we want to have new creations. Because if we all just start using the AI for everything, we're all just going to have the same output.
Right. And it's going to sound monotonous. I really like the fact that kids are having conversations with you around AI, and they're a little worried about, people writing music and getting Grammys for that's refreshing to hear. But it's also refreshing to know that you as an organization are potentially creating new career opportunities for these kids to think about, and you're developing that next generation of leadership. That's really exciting and refreshing to hear. Brittany, we are coming up on time, and I know I didn't follow the script that I sent you earlier. I was just going with the flow of the conversation. But as an organization, as the founder of Rosie Riveters, what can we hope to see from your organization in the future? And what is your big ask for our audience today? Like, what do you need help with? What do you want manufacturers? How do you want them to be more proactive? What do you need from parents? What do you need from teachers? I want to give you the floor on to ask a question to our audience in terms of what you need or what's happening in the future.
I would say every organization is different, so I can't speak for every nonprofit, right? But getting connected with the community outreach organizations to support the narrative of the dialogue that you want to have is my kind of call to industry. I have been to so many manufacturing events where people are actively complaining that people will go and work for McDonald's, but they won't go and work for them, and they'll make double the amount of money for the same level of entry, like same level of experience. They don't know what you do. They don't know how to access what you do. And when you talk to them, when you just are at the hiring point and they have no narrative or connection to that reality, it is a lot harder for them to then accept or pursue that or take that risk with you. When they go to McDonald's because they know it, they know what's expected, they know what they're expected to do as a part of it. It's the place where that risk is very much kind of understood. So those communications, that narrative is one of the biggest things that I think is missing from a lot of industries, not just manufacturing, right? Telling your story. And that doesn't, and a lot of times even organizations that are national want to go really big. But starting in those hyper local conversations, starting with your employee engagement groups, starting with the people who can go out and get connected is going to give you a much bigger ROI. And so from Rosie's perspective, if you want to do that, give us a call. We're happy to tell you who we're working with or how we build relationships. Our model of growing is not to say, here's a point on the map, we want to go to that place. We evolve in two ways. Either that place contacts us and says, we heard about you and we want you here, which is a lot. I just got 3 requests from different places in Florida. If you're in Pensacola, Sarasota, call me. Or awesome. We get an industry who comes and says, we know what you're doing. We've seen what you've done in other places. Do you do that here? And if our answer is no, it's if you're willing to allow us to reach out to community about connection points, we will come back and we can make that happen. That doesn't mean we just go and like, if you build it, they will come. It means we reach out to the local school and say, here's what we offer. Is this a value add to your ecosystem? We've never had them say no, which I'm sure it'll happen eventually, but to date it hasn't happened, right? Or we connect with the Girl Scouts, or if you have an existing community relationship but haven't figured out how to do that hands-on engagement about your product and what you do, we are happy to resource them and understand what their needs and barriers are, right? Even if that's the Girl Scouts says we're doing nature badges, I can still talk to you about car manufacturing, right? And in a really fun way that the kids are going to remember. So the bigger thing is just, if it's not Rosie, reach out to a local organization and have the conversations about what you do. And when you're having those conversations, think about the lens of opportunity. What can I come and do when I work with you? What does it take to be there? What resources? If you have resources that you are providing as a pathway into your career and you are not shouting them from the rooftops and they are not clearly able to be discovered on your webpage, you are missing so much talent. It's crazy. And then also just understanding that also when you talk to kids in K through 5th grade, you're also talking to their parents. There's a multi-channel workforce development pipeline that happens when you engage elementary school. Yeah,
I think that hits on the point that I try to make with everyone within engineering manufacturing. We don't have a talent gap. We have an awareness gap and an exposure gap. And I believe the work that you're doing with Rosie Riveters is a huge answer or a huge solution to that obstacle that we have within manufacturing. What is the quickest way for people to connect with you and learn more about Rosie Riveters?
RosieRiveters.org is right there. You can hit the contact us page. You can also just email me. It's just Brittany.Greer@RosieRiveters.com, but A-N-Y, not N-E-Y, but it'll figure it out. Drop us a message. I can get you connected to the right person with our team, and we'd love to talk to you. But if not, if all else fails, go to the website. All the other social connections are there. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, I constantly run my mouth on my articles about all of this stuff. So if it's something you're interested in, I'd be happy to share more.
That's awesome. I will be sure to share all of your information in the episode notes that I'll be sharing after this episode. To all those tuning in, thank you so much. Brittany, thank you so much. And thank you for all the hard work that you're doing, because we desperately need more people in engineering and manufacturing. And you are helping develop that pipeline with the work that you're doing at Rosie Riveters. So be sure to stay tuned next month in July, or no, we're in June. Yep. Next month in July, I'm having Kathy Miller as the guest for July. She just wrote a new book, and she is talking about leadership within engineering and manufacturing, and it connects really well to what we discussed today. So please tune in next month. I will have more information about that, but I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Thanks again, Brittany. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye.
This episode of Mavens of Manufacturing has been sponsored by Z Ink Solutions. Z Ink Solutions. This isn't your grandmother's copywriting service. We provide copywriting and copy editing services that provide impactful text and memorable storytelling for a variety of brands and industries. Contact us today at zinkSolutions.com. That's z-inksolutions.com.